Have you ever had one of those days? I've had one of those days. I've had everything that possibly could go wrong doing this demo go wrong. I've recorded this now multiple times, all trying to figure out the best way to give you the best lesson possible. And I'm sharing this part because there is some frustration. There's some frustration with what it is that I'm doing and why it is I'm trying to do it. The reality of it is that when we're dealing with virtual reality, we're dealing with optics. Optics in terms of the human eye, optics in terms of the way we view screens, optics in the way the cameras view the world to put them back into us. A lot of that's to do with the real world interface. I need you looking at the real world. I need you thinking of the real world beyond the way that you look at it normally. And one of the ways that we do that is with panoramic images. Panoramic images allows us to view the world all at once, to realize that we see things as a small window, but we remember things as a panorama. Panoramic imagery is part of, again, skyboxes. Panoramic imagery is part of the way that the optics of these devices work. Matter of fact, when I put on a head-mounted display, it often gives me a panoramic view of the world, even though it's an artificial one. It's important to see the world this way. It's important to see how these optics works, how your cameras work, how the computer assembles these things together. When we did photogrammetry, it was looking for the disparity between the images to try to align where the cameras were and to allow you to see where the dimensionality is. With panoramic photography, it's the exact opposite. We are trying to create the camera to be at this perfect magical point in space. The camera can see everything at once, and if it can see everything at once, it can create a perfect visual, spherical image representation of the world. Now, you don't have this type of tech. I'm not going to have all the tech in the world to show you, but I want you to have the experience so that you get a better feel for what's going on. Remember, everything we do in this class is about feeling. Not feeling like, but feeling about the way that your perceptual and cognitive systems work and make you feel. So yesterday I went out and did a photo shoot, and I'm going to show you a video of me teaching you how to do a photo shoot. And my photo shoot was a disaster because everything was out of focus. So I had to reshoot again. The other thing here is I'm trying to give you a really good demonstration that is a mix between too overloadedly complex and too, I pressed the button and it works. So I want you to understand that I'm going to be going through this multiple times. Some of you, this is going to be the greatest thing since sliced bread. That's the other thing. For this class, each of you may embrace a different part of this differently. Some of you may, panoramic photography, that's where my life is. I'm going to be doing this type of work. And for some of you, it's going to be like, I've done the exercise, let's move on. And that's okay. That everything's for everybody. That's why this is really a survey of virtual reality immersive techniques. I need to let you know this because as I go through all these little demos, I can sit there and going, I'm going to show you how to make a panorama. That's not good enough. I need to understand why we're doing this, why I want you to truly understand what the little bits are that make these things work. When you're working inside of VR, is your camera moving anywhere? What does it mean when the camera moves, as in rotate in space versus truly move? All that are things that you need to consider when you start building these experiences for people. Because again, right now we are capturing the real world experience, trying to reproduce the real world. And while we're going to do it in a very makeshift way, it's still trying to reproduce the real world and trying to get you to understand that to reproduce the real world is to look at the real world in a different manner. So let's start off by looking at this little 3-minute video on how to shoot. Okay, so I'm going to take a panorama right now. And to do that, I'm going to use this phone here, though I'm actually not going to take pictures with it because it's a crappy dead phone. The axis of the camera, I'm going to do tall. And I'm going to do wide angle. If your camera does wide angle, as wide as you can go. If you can't do wide angle, then whatever you got. Remember, you want the pictures to be tall, and remember, you want to make sure that it's the same point in space and that you rotate around the camera. So you almost want to be looking at a point over the ground and make sure that whatever's happening, the camera is rotating around that point, which means that you're going to walk around the camera as you go. Now that's going to be great, and you're going to take that photo, and you take a series of photos, and you want like a good 20-30% overlap. It never hurts to have more photos than fewer. The other thing you want to do is start to balance how far away things are. I don't want to have myself be so close over here, but then so far over here. So I want to sort of kind of equidistant myself to around things so that it's sort of nice as I go. So spatially, I feel comfortable with what I'm looking at. That'll give me a nice cylindrical panorama. Not that hard to do. Again, remember, hold the camera
over the same point in space, at the same height in space, which you can do basically by like using your body as a reference, and then rotate it around the camera lens, not around, I'm rotating the whole thing, but just remember, rotate it around as if this part of the camera, the line on this side, had a spike going through it, and you were just walking around that spike. All right, you got that. That's part one. Part one. Part two is a little bit more interesting. What if I wanted to get more? Well, if I wanted to get more, remember, I have to do the same thing. I have to make sure that I'm still at the same point in space. So remember, the camera's still going to be over the same spot on the ground. I'm still going to be rotating around that spot. It's still going to be the same height in space, but this time I'm going to tilt a little bit downward. Now, I don't want to tilt all the way downward. I want to tilt downward so that, again, remember there's like a 30% overlap between my photos? I want to, there's a 30% overlap between these photos as well. And then I'm going to rotate around that magical point, which is really tricky because now I'm holding the camera up and at an angle, not this part of an angle, this at an angle. If I want to do it even crazier, I could even go back and do a third row. You probably can do a row going up. So there's definitely, it's easy to go 1, 2, or 2. There's, maybe 3. But the fourth one's almost impossible. It's sky. You're never going to see anything. I would recommend doing this outdoors, by the way. Nice outdoor panorama is a fun way to go. The other thing you're going to run into is, obviously, I'm doing it right. I'm doing it perfect. Look at that. There's no sun. I'm doing it at twilight. So it's making it good for me. If I was doing it in the bright sun of the day, I would want to make sure I was doing it closer to noon as possible, or something where you don't see the sun. Overcast is great. So now that I've basically given you the rundown, again, camera. But imagine there's a line going straight, a pole going straight down that lens. You're holding it exactly over the same spot, and you're walking around that lens. Now I'm going to go using my good phone. I'm going to take those photos. I'm going to do I'm going to do 2 sets of these photos. One set I'm going to do with my ultra wide angle lens because I got a fancy camera, but I'm also going to do it with a regular lens. I'll do the regular lens first so you can sort of see how I'm doing it, and then I'll do the wide angle lens, and then I'll do the post-production in the next video. There you go. Let's do this.
All right. So everything I said there was true, except I made a few mistakes. And the number one mistake I made was that I was working a little too quickly because it was a little chilly, and all my photos were blurry. The other is I didn't make sure that I locked things down. At any time I take a photograph, I'm looking at 3 different items here. I'm looking at my, obviously the things that are fixed, which of course in this case would be the field of view, which lens I'm using. But it's also going to choose the exposure, the white balance, and the focus. The focus, the white balance, and the exposure, obviously with every photograph might be different. But in this case, I don't want them to be so vastly different that when I go from photo to photo to photo, they start changing color. That would be the white balance. From photo to photo to photo, they start changing brightness. That would be the exposure. Or from photo to photo to photo, they start changing focus because I'm focusing near or far. So ideally, what you want to do is you want to take your camera and lock the exposure and the focus, which every camera can do, even if it's a phone. And so that you want to do is you want to figure out where the sun is, not that photo, but the opposite side of that photo. Find something that's medium distance away, lock your focus and exposure there, and then take all of your photos in a circle, again with a good amount of overlap. So this would be the panorama that I took the first time. And of course, you can see it started with the car. Right? Okay, so it started with the tip of the car, and it ended with the tip of the car. Matter of fact, I've got a question about whether I need the both versions of that as well. I usually put the hand in a sort of like this is when the next series begins. That's just a trick that I do, makes my life easier. All right, now if you look over here, if you look at the car, so this is the window, the car, the ground. Now you look at it, the window, look at this. This is the wider angle lens on my camera. Obviously, with the wider angle lens, I need to take fewer photos. The overlap is much easier. Also notice, by the way, the sun shows up in the photo. Not much I can do about that, though I did get it at the height of as the high as it's going to be right now. The other thing you're going to notice is we've got lens flare. Not much I can do about the lens flare. I could, if I had a real camera, I would use like a sun shield, or if I could get my hand off outside of the camera to block the sun, I can do a little bit of that as well. But at the end of the day, lens flare is going to show up, and there's not much I can do, and that is what it is. So, I did a second round. I think I did like 2 rounds. That's a nice round. And then I did down, which is sort of me being silly. And I think I did up. It's me looking upwards. I think I didn't go. I think I went in smaller increments than I needed to. And then I think I did up again. And then I think I did straight up. Yeah, there we go. Straight up. And then I think I kind of went down. Kind of hard to do straight down, obviously, because of my feet. But I'm not really worried about the spherical part. Hear me carefully. I'm not worried about the spherical part. We're going to create only part of the sphere, and that's okay. I'm using a program called Huggin. I think it's called Huggin. I'm going to call it Huggin. It has an interface of simple, advanced, and expert. We're going to stay in the simple mode. But watch me do this. And by the way, if you get to this point, don't shoot yet. Watch the video, even if you're just listening to the video. See where my mistakes are so that you can go back and go, oh, that's how I need to stitch this together. Now, if I load the images, I could come over here and I could load one slew of images. Now, let's be practical here. This image and this image have enough overlap in them that I actually don't need that image. So you see that? Let me make it a little larger. Oh, maybe that's too large. Right? If I come back down here to this image, there's enough overlap between image number, I'm going to go a little bit lower. There's enough overlap between image number 19 and image number 9 that image number 8 is irrelevant. Now, the question is there enough overlap between 9 and 18? No. So I need 9 through 19. Yes. And when I click on open, it's going to load them. And don't worry about the fact that it makes it look ridiculous. What you need to worry about over here is the 3 pieces of information that it gets from the metadata built into the camera. It's a normal lens, a rectilinear lens. It takes flat, square images. There are other types of cameras out there. That's what this is. And the focal length and the focal length multiplier, it reads from the metadata of the camera itself. Which means that just like with the last project, the HEIC format is not going to work for you. You need to make sure that you're getting the true metadata off the camera, so save your images in PNG or JPEG. All right. Now, this is obviously ridiculous. It just loads them in. There's no rhyme or reason to them. But the question is, how do we get them to align together? We have 2 different options. One option, which we're going to do in the next round, is to do it by hand. To literally say, these are the points that are similar in the same photos, and I'd like you to line them together. Of course, that means I'm going to say, this one goes with this one, and this one goes with this one, and this one goes with this one. If I want the computer to do it, I just hit the align button, and what it's going to do is, it's going to go through all 10 photographs, and literally go 1, 1 through 10, 2, 1 through 10, 3, 1 through 10. Actually, it's going to go 1, 2 through 10, 2, 3 through 10, 3, 4 through 10, because I already did the other ones. And it's going to go through and it's going to try to find matches in every single photograph. In every single direction, it's looking for similarities. Now remember, these photographs are taken from different points of view. They're tilted differently, so there's different distortions in them. But it's still going to try to find them all. And then, after it does that, it's going to take all those control points and then try to recalibrate the lenses to try to give me the most accurate stitching together possible. Now, this is an amazing bit of feat of math here, by the way. And you're like, holy moly, that's pretty amazing, isn't it? Is it perfect? No. Why? Well, I wasn't perfect. If this was on a panoramic tripod head, if I actually had this thing perfectly lined up where I went through the nodal point of the lens like I told you to, these would line up beautifully. Because it would literally go through, realize there was no parallax error, calculate all the matching points, if it calculated the matching points properly, and then calculate the lens settings. Now, it is kind of like photogrammetry in that sense, where instead of trying to remember where the cameras are, it's trying to figure out what type of lens you're using. Now, what's interesting about this is, of course, is I'm not perfect. The software isn't perfect either. It's looking for matching points, but it could actually get confused by matching points as well. Though I'll be honest with you, an outdoor thing with this much pattern, we're good. Smooth wall, blue sky, doesn't have a chance. Now, let's move from the assistant over to what we call over to projection. Right now we're in what's called cylindrical projection, but that may be an aesthetically pleasing thing, but in the industry we use equirectangular projections, which is basically 360 by 180, even though it's not set to 180 right now. That's what we're going to need to put in any of our software. Let me go to Move Drag and show you what we've got though. If I go to Move Drag, what you're going to realize is that I can come over here and I can slide my panorama any way I want, because it's really 36 degrees, it's a circle. And that's what's kind of fun about this. And if I wanted to make a print of this, I wouldn't put the pole in the center. I maybe will put my house in the center. I can also drag downward and start to look at how the world is working a little bit like this. Let me go back over to projection and set this to 180 degrees. So you can see the full size of the sphere. And what that means, if I go back to Move Drag, is that when I go back to this, that shows me how much of the sky is missing. And if I go over here, it shows me how much of the ground is missing. You can also click over here and sort of look at the how much of the sphere you've captured this way as well. When you're done, of course, you basically hit straighten, which of course always makes your life a little bit easier. Straighten is still not very good because I need those black bars on top and bottom. I'm going to go back to projection. Please don't be frozen. Say it's 180 degrees. It keeps turning that off. And then I'm going to go over to crop. Right now, as you see what's to auto crop, I'm going to click this button over here, which is going to say reset crop to maximum possible area. It's a mistake you don't want to make. Now that I've done this, I basically said that this is my panorama. So I'm going to come over to back to my assistant and say create panorama. I'm going to create it, leave the resolution as high as possible, create it as a JPEG, and make sure that JPEG is set to 100%. You know how much I love 100% JPEG. Do not make a PNG file because the next piece of software we're going to use doesn't accept PNG files. I'm going to leave all the output set to the defaults, and I'm going to click on OK. And it's going to require me to save the project first. Save the project. It's going to spit it into its engine, and it's going to try to stitch it all together, which takes a few minutes. Now, I want to point out that as I go to stitch all this together, the stitcher is open right here. It is, there it is. Somewhere it is stitching. There it is. Somewhere it is. There it is. It's stitching it together. So it's doing all this work behind the scenes. You might have some error messages that I haven't shown. Those error messages might involve color and blending and things like that. And just keep pushing through and see what it says. Again, the better you take photos in terms of locking your camera down, making sure things are in focus, making sure that the lighting and the color matches, making sure that there's texture, making sure that you have enough overlap. That 20-30% overlap is huge. All of that is going to make a really big difference to make this whole project work for you. Now, when I'm done, and right now again, we're in this free program called Huggin. When I'm done, I'm going to go into a free program called FSPViewer. Also, we'll give you the link to that. This program does one thing and one thing alone, and it allows you to play back spherical panoramic images. So it takes that image that has an aspect ratio of 2:1, that basically globe image, loads it in and allows you to look around it, which is pretty cool. Obviously, I'm going to leave it open because we're not there yet. What's happening right now, if you look in the folder, is you can see that it's actually making little pre-warped versions of all of the images, which is trying to sort of stitch together nicely. Again, this is pretty cool. It's blending the images together right now and saving them as one massive image. So let's see how it all comes together. I hope this makes sense. This version is much easier than the next version is. Actually, I shouldn't say that. We're doing the regular version. When I go to the wide angle version, I'm going to be a little bit more manual. More manual may actually make you happier. It takes a little bit longer, but it may give you the control that you're looking for to make this magic work. All right. Come on over here. It's almost done. I'll pause for the cause. Okay, so it's done. What has it made? Well, what you're going to see here is this made this beautiful photograph. Look at that. Look at that. And it's pretty awesome, by the way. We'll look at the errors in a second. When you first look at it, you probably don't see any errors, which is good. What you see is this weirdly cigar-banded distortion. You see it kind of curves and curves and curves. Don't be fooled. This is the image we need. Now, let's load that image in the viewer. File, open. And if I open this viewer, you're going to see the world mapped to a sphere, which is going to let me... Okay, so first of all, that field of view is beautiful, right? You would not know this is a panorama. It's just a photograph. Now, if we can instantly see some mistakes in the photograph, there's an error here, there's an error here, but I can spin around the photograph, which is kind of awesome. And again, some of the mistakes are more obvious than others, and some of them take a while to notice. There's a mistake. There's a mistake, of course. The fact that I don't have top and bottom, it's not really a mistake. It's the reality of the world in which we live. But this is a pretty good panorama. And if you turned in something that was this good, even with a stitching error or two like that, I would not be depressed. I would go, oh, well, there's a mistake. Well, why is there a mistake? Again, one of two reasons. Number one, because I didn't spin properly. That would be reason number one. Number two is because the software didn't accurately accept the proper control points. So, what do? Well, now, first of all, we just have to sit here and say, this is pretty cool, right? This is pretty cool. So let's do it again. Save. And let's move on to part 2 of the demo, which would be, what happens if I were to use the wide-angle photos, which means I need fewer of them? What happens if I wanted to do manual control points? And what happens if I decided that I really wanted to stitch more above and below? So we've got 2 really more kind of exciting things to do along the way. File, oops, not open, new, stop that. File, new. All right, so I'm going to do a new project. I'm going to load images again, just like I did last time. This time, however, instead of using that first row of photos, which of course was the regular photos, I'm going to go down to the second row, the first row of photos, which was that stack of photos. The second stack of photos and the second stack of photos uses the wide-angle lens, which of course is much more convenient for me. Actually, the third stack of photos uses the wide-angle lens as well. Which one's better? Well, they both seem to get the tops of the buildings, and they both seem to start with a car and end with a car. Let's do the second set of photos, starting with 431 and ending with 439. So literally 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 photos. And to be honest with you, that last photo, I don't even need that one. Look at that. There's enough overlap between these 8 photos, starting with 32, ending with 39. These 8 photos is all I'm going to work with. I'm going to hit open. And like before, it gives me gibberish. And you'll notice that it's still a normal lens, but it's giving me a focal length and a multiplier that is different. I am not going to align the photos because I don't want it. I don't want the software to generate the control points. Instead, I'm going to generate the control points by hand. I'm going to go over to Layout, and I'm going to click on the first photo. When I bring up Layout, what it's going to do is it's going to show me, I'm going to make this window, I can make this window bigger, and in fact I can full screen it if I want. It's going to show me picture number 0, and if I want, picture number 1. And my job is to figure out what point is the same in both photographs. You're looking for exact points to make your life easier. Now, let me come over here and take a look. I'm going to click around here. It's going to zoom in when I do. Right around my address, I'm going to double click there, and I'm going to drag this little plus exactly under the corner of that sticker. And when I do that, if I come over here to around the same point, if you look, it said, oh, right there, and it found the same point for me. And then I click Add, and that would be control point number 1. I'm going to go to the top over here where my house is, right over there. And now I'm going to drag it exactly at the little corner there. I'm going to say, you know what? And look at that. It literally found the same spot on the other side. I hit Add. I'm going to do a third. You always want at least 3, and I'm only going to do 3 for our purposes here. I'm going to click on, now here's a one that if there was 0 parallax error, this spot here and this spot here should line up. That would assume that there's 0 parallax error. But I'm gonna because if there, so this is one that spatially only works if I rotate the camera properly. This one works even if I didn't rotate the camera properly. So I'm gonna go with this one first. Now I'm gonna go with the one. I'm gonna do the one that assume that I rotated properly. So I'm gonna do where the two roofs meet. And again, that's just a visual meeting. And look, it was able to do that. Now, if I rotate it properly, this is a true spot. If I didn't rotate properly, it isn't. Notice, by the way, this image is crisper than this because this is in the middle of this picture and this is at the edge of this picture, and that's part of the way that this thing works. Now I click Add. That's picture number 0 and 1. Next, picture number 1 and 2. Aha. So, what spots overlap? So I'm going to pick, again, spots that I think are going to be absolute in both photos. And I want them to be spread. I don't want them to be clustered together. That doesn't do me as much as if I spread them out across multiple planes, so that allows me to see what's going on here. Remember, I only have to do this on 8 images here, so I'm only going to be doing this 24 times. It's not the end of the world. Add. That's 1. Let's do the corner of the chimney here. Let's do that little corner of the chimney right there. Yeah, it got it. There you go. That was good. Add. And then let's do the corner right here. Again, I'm looking for an area of high contrast and sharp corners. This way, when it comes over here, it can match it up perfectly, which is what it does, which is great. Now that's the second set of photos, 1, 2, and 3. Next, 2 and 3. Let's do the corner of the window. All right, and I come over here, and it nailed it, the corner of the window. Very good, very good. Thank you, thank you. Let's do let's do this corner right down here. And, oh, found it. I love how smart the software is. And this is free. I love free. Let's do this corner right up here. And, yep. Yeah, it's all about point of view. There we go. All right, click add there. Now we've got that next set of photos, 3 and 4. Much more challenging, right? Hard to get in the tree. So what are we going to do? I'm going to do the fire hydrant. So somewhere on the fire hydrant there. So I'll do like the nipple of the fire hydrant. There you go. And then I can come over here and say fire hydrant, and it's going to go, there it is. Nailed it. And then I'm going to do somewhere on the back of this guy's car. I'm going to do a little spot right in the center of his trunk. Uh-oh, couldn't find it. Oh, you can't. See, if I had done a good job, that pole would have lined up perfectly. So this is a dead giveaway that I have parallax error. This is parallax error. So that is that's bad. It means I could have done a better job. And that means there will be errors in my photograph because there is parallax error. Because again, if I had rotated properly, then the relationship between this car and this pole and this car and this pole would have been constant. And that isn't, the fact that it isn't means I made a mistake. All right? And that mistake will come to haunt me visually in the sky. Now, if this is this pole, then this is that wire, right like there, should appear somewhere there. Yeah, there we go. There we go. So those will line up there. So I've got 3 control points there. 1, 2, 3. Now I could do a fourth one. I'll give you an example of a fourth one over here. What if I did where the grass hits the tree? Again, this only works if the parallax is accurate, but at least it visually matches it. But you see what I'm saying is this is what we're trying to do, is make it visually match. Remember, if your camera was truly rotated on the nodal point, then it would perfectly match all the way around. Nothing would ever shift. You would never get a stereoscopic pairing out of this. In other words, there would be no variations in every photograph. It would be a panorama, which is what it is. Let's try up here. There's a fun one. Let's try where those two meet. Again, slightly different point of view, so it'll be slightly different where those two meet, but we do our best. All right, click on add. Let's look at the ground. So let's do where the grass meets the crack. So we'll do right around there. That's good. Add that one in there. Let's do my truck. Oops. Let's go for the corner right there. Corner right there. Alright, so now we've got another 3 control points next. 5 and 6. Let's do another crack. Let's do the foreground crack here. Let's do this one. 1. Oh, couldn't match it visually because of the distortion, you see. More resolution here than here. Actually, what I'm going to do, I'm going to do the crack right in the groove of that piece of dirt. And then I'll match it up with the groove in that piece of dirt. That's a good one right there. So that's 1. Let's come over here to where the driveway crack hits. Yeah, the grass hits the driveway. Now notice you're like, wait a second, you went the other direction. Yeah, it turns out you can start any picture you want. Ooh, let's do the tip of the house. That's a good one. Let's do the tip right there. And there he is. 1, 2, 3. All right, next. And then 6 and 7. So again, here's a great example of parallax. If I wanted to look where the tree and the car hit. So if I were to say I wanted to see where the tree hits the wheel of the car, I come back over to this side, it's not matched up properly. That's an example of parallax error. This is not matching with this, so this would be a really bad place to do it. So instead, I'm going to go for corner of the sign. But I just want you to realize that if you see the tree and the tree overlaps the wheel here, the tree doesn't overlap the wheel here, that means you made a mistake. That means the parallax is off. It's not the end of the world, but it's not great. And again, I made the same mistake myself. Let's go look inside that tree. Let's go for the tip of the wood right there. And it got close, but it's not. It's got really close. But again, for it to make this all match when there's parallax error, it's going to have to do blending and cropping and do weird things. And again, the software is great when things are right. It's not great when things aren't right. And that's the difference between other programs. All right, last one. Okay, lots of overlap here. Let's go with the tip of this house, right? So we're going to go with that right there. Beautiful. Thank you for that. We're going to go with the tip of this house. And the question is this something a computer can see? And the answer is, well, clearly it saw it, but you never can quite tell. And that's why we're doing it instead, is we are smarter than the computer in terms of deciding which points are better and more accurate to determine. Because it matches, doesn't knows which ones are more important to match than not. 7 and 0. So we've done them all. Now this is the panorama editor. Remember, this is actually a separate window, and I can close this window and leave the software open. To make my life easier, I'm going to save the project, because it's usually good to save the project in case the program crashes, which it did. And then I'm going to go back to Assistant, and I'm going to hit Align. And this time, instead of creating control points, it's going to use the control points that I've generated and try to go through and make all sorts of modifications and say, if these are the control points, how do we put it all back together? And this is what it's done. Boy, that's weird, isn't it? That's weird. But we'll get back to whether it was good or bad in a second. Let's first just take a look at what we've done. Again, we're going to go to projection, which is set to equirectangular. We're going to set again to 180 degrees. Notice, by the way, we went from an 80 degree height to 110 degree height. That's the difference between a wide angle lens. If I click on move and drag and I look at the bottom, well, now you can see there's only one big hole in the bottom. And the best part is that hole in the sky, for the most part, doesn't have any data in it. It's got a little bit of the pole, a little bit of the wire, but for the most part, it's purely sky. Again, if I click straighten, I can then come back here and say, am I really happy? Click on layout. Am I really happy with the way that these two pictures are stitched together? And the answer is no. No, I'm not, because it seemed to give me some sort of an error message. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and I'm going to move this control point to the corner of the door. No, I don't want a new one. I want to move the old one. Oops, sorry about that. So I'm going to move the control point to... Actually, you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab control point number 1. I'm going to delete it. There we go. I'm going to do it all over again. Make my life feel a bit easier. That's a little bit easier for me. 1. There you go. Add that. That looks good. Any other ones I can add right now? So foreground, background, background. You know, maybe where I said that was dangerous. Maybe it is dangerous. Maybe I should delete this one. And maybe I should come over here and do the corner of the house. I'm going to do an absolute corner of the house. Oh, it's not in the other photo. I can't do it. Let me come over here and do this corner right here, which it is in the photo. And then because I wasn't happy, I'm going to do a third image, a third dot. I'm going to put it right back in this one and that one. Okay, good. Now I'm going to close this window and I'm going to hit align again, and it's going to realign the photographs. And so we can see what it does with this line right here, which we did not like. Hoping that that was... No, that wasn't the problem. All right, so let's go back over to the layout. So it was this one to this one that was the problem. Aha. So let's take a look at this one. Oh yes, now we see. I didn't do any foreground matching. So 2 has a... Okay, so let's take a look over here. See what we can do to make this better. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to... let's put 1 point here. And 1 point there. That's good. And then what else do I have in the photo that I can use? It's foreground related. I'm going to do one on this light fixture. So I'm going to do one right on the tip of the light fixture. And there you go. And add that. And now let's come over here and align it again and see if that helps with this. It doesn't. Weird. Well, I'm gonna keep going and see how this all stitches together in a little bit. So what is the problem? Why isn't it stitching? Let's go back over to layout and see what is the issue. So this to this, this to this. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay, I'm just going to keep going. So now that I've done this, if I go to projection and I set it back to 180. Oh, first I'm going to go to move. I'm set to go to 180, like I did before. So I've got the whole picture. I can click move drag and decide what I want to be in the center of my picture, which obviously is the house, even though it's got weird stitching right now. I then straighten it, go back to projection, set it to 180, and I go to crop. And I reset the crop so it does the whole picture. I don't want to lose any of my picture. And then I'm going to come over here to Assistant and create Panorama. Again, I want a JPEG. Okay. It's going to tell me it's saving the project. It has to save the project before it moves on. Saves the project. And then it should bring up the stitching wizard, which is right here. It's back in the background. Where's the other piece of it? There it is in the bash processor. So in the background it's stitching and it's going to put it together and we'll get a brand new panorama out of it. So while we're doing that, let's come over here and see what's going on in the folder. So now that you understand this idea of control points and understand the difference between control points that are absolute versus control points that are parallax-based control points. Parallax-based control points are where I got one image thing behind the thing and where those intersect is visual versus like going, that is the exact same on this and this. Again, the less parallax you have, the better your picture will stitch. The closer things are, the more parallax error you have, by the way. That's also the way these things work. So it's stitching it, and along the way it's creating all sorts of little intermediaries. It's going to be a much bigger field of view. Now, what if I wanted to have more? Ooh, I'm done. Let's take a look. Oh, it did a great job of stitching it. You know, this is me being paranoid. But as you can see, the more I put in, the more I can correct. So like right over here, and matter of fact, if when we're done here, if I saw something that I didn't like, obviously not the wire. I can't do anything about the wire. But like right over here, see that pole? If I wanted to make that pole stitch together better, I would put more control points on or near that pole, and it would sort of force things better together. Where are the errors on this thing? Is that it? We're going to go through and see what kind of other errors I have. Then we're actually going to try to fix it. Let's bring up the Panorama Viewer again, FSPViewer. God, I love the magic of this. It really is magical. Not that one, this one. All right, so front of my house looks perfect. All right, that looks good. All right, what about this guy's house? The front of this guy's house looks good. Oh, there's an error right there. Do you see it? A little fall off in the brick. Wouldn't notice it at first. So this would be one thing to focus in on, is that brick. I don't see anything in the tree. Of course I wouldn't. That pole looks good. That pole looks bad. Boy, this is pretty good. So you do this, you're getting a good grade, right? You're like, I would still want to fix that pole. Oh, there's another error right here in the front of the car. Right there. That's it. There's 3 little mistakes there. So the question is how do we make them better? Well, we come over here, we go back to layout, and we say, all right, which one is our problem here? It's the poles that are our problem. It's this one right here. Right? And of course that's going to bring up the panorama editor. Oops. Come on, there we go. So what am I looking at here? So I did the tree, that's good, but it doesn't like that thing up there. So let's delete number 0, and let's take a look in the poll to see if we can find some things on the poll that'll make my life a little bit easier. So is there something on the, there's a knot right there. All right, there's a knot right there. Where is the knot? Is the knot on the same side? So over and up. Is that the knot? Set the same knot. All right, that's good. Add that control point. Let's do it over here. Let's come over here and say, let's do the center of that black dot, whatever that is, and add that control point. So now we have 2 control points on there. That's good. That was the next part we had. Let's go back to the other stitching error we had, which is on the car itself. So let's add some foreground control point. And we're going to do that little twig right there on the line. And there you go, that's good. And then the next control point we had an issue with was right over here. We probably need something up front. So let's do the corner of this brick and the corner of that brick. And I click add, close that window, back over here, and realign and see what that does. Okay. I don't know what that meant. Let's do it again. Okay, this time we didn't get an error message. That's good. So again, I'm going to set the projection to 180 degrees. Make sure it's equirectangular. I'm going to make sure I reset my crop. All those things I have to do, otherwise I'm not going to get the full 2:1 image. I'm going to go back to my assistant and hit create panorama. I'm going to hit make sure it's a JPEG, like I did before. Okay. It's going to save the project again. I don't care if it overwrites it. That works for me. I'm going to go to save the image. It's going to ask me if I want to overwrite the image. And you know what? I'll say yes, though normally I wouldn't. All right, and I will pause for the cause. All right, and it's done. Let's take a look at what that is. And let's take a look at the new version of the photo. All right, we see less of an error over here. We see less of over here. We still have an error on the pole, though. Interesting. You know what? If you turn this in, I would not be disappointed. All right. So, that's part 1. And I'm going to come over here and I'm going to rename it like -1 so I have it. What if I wanted to go the next level? Well, the next level is exactly that, the next level. Let's say I wanted to add to this image, so I fill in more of the blanks. Remember, I come back over here, I'm missing this much of the sky and this much of the ground. Now, this is maybe like, dude, I could fill this in a heartbeat. And that's true, but I want to show you an example of what happens if we try to add more in by hand. So I'm going to go back to the assistant, and I'm going to load another image. Now, I don't have to load a whole bunch of them. I can just literally load a couple. So let me come over here and say, what do I want to load? Now, whatever I'm going to load, I need to make sure that it attaches to another image. Now, remember, what we were missing was part of that pole. I can always fill in the sky with blue because I'm clever. So I'm going to add this image here, and I need some more grass, so I'm going to add this image here. I'm going to add these two images, 74 and 91. Hue is image stacking detected in this whole project. Stack numbers will be reassigned on the base of the section. Don't link positions. I'm going to say don't do that. That's bad. Now if I go to layout, the first thing I'm going to grab the new photo, double click on it, and somewhere here it's going to open the editor. Here we go. So now, this is image number 8. Image number 8 is the pole. Which one does it match up with? Well, let's go through them all. Not that one. Not that one. Not that. That one. So I need to figure out where the control points that match these pictures together are. Well, let's do it. So 1, 2. That's good. I can't do the tippy top because it doesn't exist, but I can come over here and do 1, 2. That's good. That's going to give me a straight line. I need a third spot. Let's do the tip of this house. Let's do 1, 2, and add that image there. So there we go. That's 1, 2, 3. Is there another place that I can align? Is there any other point on this photo that I can throw in here? Not a lot of data here. And of course you can see there's the parallax error because this chimney is here and this chimney is there, and it tells you that if it was lined up properly, it'd be lined up properly. Alright, so now that I've done that, what about picture number 9? What does that one match up with? Ooh, that one matches up with picture number 5. That one does as well. Right? So I can come over here and I can say that this, the curve of this dot matches the curve of that dot. That's one. I can say this matches with this. It's close, not quite. There we go. That's 2. And the third one is I will say that this, I'll use a little piece of dirt over there, matches with this. So now I have 3 pictures there as well. So now the question is, will this help or hurt my final calculations? Well, only one way to find out. Again, let's go back to the assistant. You can see where we have over here. Actually, if I click on Align, now it's going to grab those 2 other images and throw them in the mix and then try to recalculate all the stuff. And if all goes well, you're going to see that I have greatly... I need to jump my Stitcher open. Oops, wrong one. If I come over here, you're going to see now it's jumped more into play. If I click on Move Drag, actually let me go back to... Now I've got 164. Let me go back to 180 real fast. If I click on Move Drag, what you're going to notice is that I have a lot more stuff. Now, obviously didn't stitch it together properly. I wasn't standing in the right spot. But you can see how much more I have eliminated. And again, if I had shot properly, more and more and more is more and more and more. Straighten, projection, 180, crop, reset crop to maximum, assistant, create panorama, make it a JPEG, let it do its thing, let it save itself along the way, and then this time, because I renamed the old JPEG, it's not going to ask me for the other stuff. Oops. Now, it actually just closed the whole project, but that's not the end of the world, because I saved the project and I'm currently running a batch processor. So the way this program works is it actually, you build the project in the software, you then save it and throw it into this batch processor, which does all the work. So the fact that I actually accidentally closed the project isn't the end of the world, because the last thing I did was save it and start rendering it. So there you go. You are not required to try to make the 360. You are required to try to make the best panorama you can. That's all I want from you. Will it require you doing some manual work in the software? Probably. The auto work, if you see, here's the thing. If you go out and you perfectly shoot around the nodal point of your lens and you set your camera properly, the auto may be enough for you. And that's what I'm trying to tell you. I want you to start to really understand and get a flavor for this. So what am I looking for? What is the assignment? Go outside, create the perfect panorama. I want to make sure that at the end of the day, it is a JPEG file, last name, that dash pano.jpg, quality 100, which is the best quality you can get, and make sure it's the equal rectilinear image. So it's going to have the aspect ratio of 2 to 1, so you have the black bars on it. All right, that is your homework assignment. Now, let's pause and see how this last thing turned out. All right, and it's done. Let's take a look. Holy moly. Look at that. Isn't that wild? More and more and more. It makes you want to do better. It makes me want to go outside and get my camera lined up properly and take a better series of shots. Though I don't really need a panorama of my house. Also, I own a panoramic camera, but that's a whole different story. Yeah. So, do I have one here? Yeah, it's a whole different story. So, yeah, that's really cool. Now let's open it in the panoramic viewer. All right, come on, come on, come on. Isn't that wild? I mean, yeah, it's wrong, but it's the process. All right, I will include some links. You've got work to do. Go do it. Thank you.